So it should be recording. Yeah, it might notice say it's recording. Yeah, not sure what happened there. I've got another session this afternoon, so if I don't get one right, I can get the second one right. Try again, EDIT model, which we'll come on to. Please ask questions as we go through today as the session. It's really good. I've tried to make it as interactive as I possibly can, but in some ways it is a little bit of a dry subject. But as I say, it is about discussion as well. So this is what the end result is hopefully going to look like. I'm not going to spend any real time on this slide whatsoever, but the end of the session today, what I'm looking at is what your behavior is with your students. So it's two things really. It's a directive behavior and a supportive behavior. Directive is very much focused around teaching, and supportive behavior is more focused around coaching. But as always, there's going to be an overlap between teaching and coaching. There's not a solid line where you split between one and the other. And later on, I'm going to break that down so you can see where that smudged line is and how you can try and differentiate it, behind the teaching and behind the coaching. So this slide, I'm going to break down later on and come back to it so you get a better understanding of how we pull it all together. So let's start from the very start for me. Approach to learning. I don't know, as instructors, I said earlier, one of the things I can remember when I did my CI, there's very little time spent on actually how we instruct. For me, the EDIT model wasn't even used, and it might have been just the course that I was on, but there was very limited time. It was more about our knowledge of how to do man overboard, our knowledge of how we leave a pontoon. It was very little done of actually how we actually deliver that as a session. Traditionally, approach to learning has been, we've got our course syllabus. So we've got a course syllabus that the RWA do, and we've got an idea how we teach it. So there's some various models, different models in the RWA instructor books. EDIT I refer to as one of them because I think that's one of the best ones, and also how we provide feedback. So we know our course syllabus and we know how to teach it. We go off and we go and run our session. So I don't know how many people have come across plan, do, review before, but this is my approach to running a session. So what's the plan? We go and deliver it, and then we review it afterwards. And then at the end of it, we get our student output. And unfortunately, the student doesn't always get it. Sometimes he's left confused. Sometimes he's left thinking, not sure what that was really about. Or if there's man overboard, I haven't got it. Don't quite understand the whole process of what I'm trying to do. He can see the logic. He knows what man overboard is, but it's the whole package as you pull it together. So the new approach, or my approach, is something slightly different. And this is recognized within a teaching environment and also a business environment as well. It's our student. I put the student first. So I'm sure a lot of you, as you start a course, the first thing you do is you have a chat with the students, you do your safety brief, if it's a classroom, where the exits are. But I sit down with my students and really try and understand what their end goal is. What are they there for? We know they're there to do Powerboat Level 2. We know they may be there to do the common crew. They may be there to do their Yachtmaster prep week. So their aim is to get their Yachtmaster. They may be aimed to be a cruising instructor or YMI. But what's their long-term goal? What are they looking to get out of it? What type of person are they? How do they learn? So I try and gain as much information at the first start about that individual student. Then from that, I've got my course syllabus and how to teach it. So I know what I'm going to deliver, but I've got a better idea now how I would teach it to those group of students that I may have, because I've got a better understanding of them. Then I go and deliver it with a plan, do, review. So that's the traditional approach in the top screen, on the top of the screen. And my approach now is the bottom of the screen. And that is the biggest change we did in race coaching. Race coaching, we had a program that we were going to go deliver. We knew roughly how we're going to go and teach it. We got all the sailors in a room. We gave them a brief of what we're going to do. We went out and did it, and we did the review. And it didn't always work. A lot of times it didn't work. The sailors didn't get it because we didn't understand the sailors. So we just changed things and put our students at the start to understand them, how they learn. And then from that, we built everything else above that, and things became so much more successful with the outputs that we were looking to get. And not only that, it was a quicker process. We found the top role, it was a longer process for the students to learn. The bottom one, we achieved things so much more quickly. So that's sort of a very overview of approach to learning. Then moving on from that, it's looking at the outcomes before we start. So on a course, if anybody wants to chip in, it'd be fantastic. A couple of people can give out what they think might be an outcome from a day skipper course or comp crew or advanced powerboat course. Someone can give me a couple of outcomes they think may be within that course. Go on, Julie. Yeah, just go for it.
Outcomes. Let's look at a power day skipper course.
Yeah.
The outcome, they know enough about their boat to be able to get it off the pontoon and out.
Yeah.
They know enough to keep themselves safe-ish. They'll still learn by mistakes, but it won't be the Titanic version mistakes.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
They know they've got a lot to learn, but they know by going slowly, if it goes wrong, it's not going to be expensive.
Yeah.
And they're happy to go out and have a go and have fun doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's good. Anybody else got any views of what an outcome could possibly be? Yeah, Bob.
I think from the start, are you hearing me? I can't see.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you loudly.
Okay, from the start, I think a lot of what we're supposed to be or could be doing is managing their expectations. So
Love
that
it.
if you find out what their expectations are, we should be managing them, possibly modifying them if they're over the top,
Brilliant.
or possibly encouraging them if they're a bit low. So it's
Yeah.
managing their expectations.
Okay, so again, we're looking, and we're going to come on to this, it's expectations of how far we push them. If you think of different ones, we've got different learning zones. We've got the comfort zone, we can stretch them, and then you get the panic zone. So exactly that, absolutely. I like that. Okay, has anybody else got any comments before I reveal my own view of what outcomes are?
Tyre bowline.
Was that you, Alan?
Never. Yeah, me.
But okay, so can you remember that for me, Tyler Bowling?
Yeah, I could do one, yeah.
Yeah, no, but can you remember what you said later on? And we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a reason for exactly for what you've just said. So that's absolutely amazing. Brilliant, thank you. You haven't set yourself up, so don't worry. We're not going to get you to do Taiwan online. For me, the outcomes is what your students get out of it. So Bob, what you were talking about there, this is a thing. It's valuable to them. It's one thing, an outcome is valuable to them. So it could be numerous different things, which I will come on to in one moment. So in running a session, what outcomes are you looking for? So if you think all the things that you spoke about there, Julie, about the different aspects of it, there's a number of outcomes could be in that one session that you could come out of it, and exactly the same what you were saying, Bob. And how do you ensure the learning outcomes are met? So what's an outcome? For me, just for the session that we're talking about this morning, an outcome for me could be man overboard, sailing jibing, sailing tacking, coming alongside, man overboard drift method, man overboard under sail, course to steer, radar collision avoidance, picking up a buoy, tying a cleat, and I could add in there tying a bowline. Could be another one. For them, they're the outcomes that come to a goal. And that goal for those students could be Common Crew, Day Skipper, Yachtmaster Exam Prep Week, Powerboat Level 2, or Advanced Powerboat. So at the end of the day, what I'm looking at is the components that sit within the course for the week, okay, that make up the ultimate goal is what they want to achieve at the end of that course. So if you can see now, I'm breaking things down into bite-sized chunks. And that's the aim of what I try to do when I'm running a course. That when we were race coaching, it was always about breaking things down into bite-sized chunks. So the sailors understood it. And it's exactly the same thing when I'm trying to teach, is trying to break things down to small bits so they understand it totally. So each of these items on here, man overboard, sailing, jibing, you could actually break them down into further details of how you teach it, because the involvement of it. And later on, we're going to have a look. We're going to split you into 2 groups of looking at man overboard, of how you teach it, and breaking it down on what element could be teaching and what element could actually be coaching. So that's looking at around what I view as an outcome. And then what the ultimate goal is the course they're on for the week. Now, one of the key things that I find from experience, and this may sound rather harsh, but I see a lack of instructors doing planning when they run a course. Not all. If you go to I do school inspections, and when I do dinghy course inspections, so if I do Powerboat Level 2, one of the things that we look at is the course plans, what their course plans they've got in place. So mine are quite detailed. So in our teaching, I have a course plan for Day Skipper, Common Crew, Advanced Powerboat, and it's actually listed out in terms of what we're supposed to teach. And obviously it can't be in order of how I'm going to teach you during the week, because it's all dependent on the weather, how things go with the students. But I have a plan in place of what I'm going to teach for the week. And then once I've got that plan, how I'm going to do that individual session, the doing it, how we're going to deliver it, and then the review afterwards. And the review is 2 ways. So the review is back to the student that you are teaching, instructing. And the review is also to me of how I delivered it. Have I delivered an effective session that is useful to that particular student or those students? Because I know when I'm teaching, or which I try not to use the word teaching, I try to use the word instructing, because teaching is just one element of it. When I'm instructing, I don't always get it right. I make mistakes. And I think we're all human beings, so we all make mistakes sometimes. So what point or what process do I do? So the starting point for me is the brief, how I brief the students, because I want them to understand what we're actually going to do. So what's the plan? What are we going to do? So I sit around the cockpit table and I try and do the brief at a natural coffee break or something. So I try to break down the sessions into bite-sized chunks, and a coffee break or biscuit break or whatever it may be, and say, guys, this is what we're going to do next, and give them the brief. I'm then going to run the exercise, which is great, and then provide feedback to the students. And then creating the action plan of how can I improve? So it's giving that feedback back to the students of what they can do next. And that again can be very much of a one-way conversation, a two-way conversation. So if you look at that as a view of creating the action plan, if you're somebody who's on a CI course or a YMI course, that action plan could be somewhat differently delivered than if it's somebody on a Common Crew or Day Skipper course or on an Advanced Powerboat course. And then just got the loop, so I start off all over again. So really that is how I look to deliver my sessions. Do they look like that every single time? I'm human. We live in the real world. Of course they don't. We've got to be realistic on what we do and how we deliver it. You know, if we're running a course and it's blowing 24 knots, in the Solent and you reefed and you're trying to get everything done, you know, things, let's be realistic about what we do. You know, we have to move things around of how we deliver it and what we do. But if you've got the structure there, it is a really powerful structure of how to deliver a session. And sometimes you need to bolt plan, do, review sessions together, one on top of the other, because you just can't take those breaks. So being realistic, but it is a powerful way of running a session and making sure you deliver what ultimately you aim to deliver. So that's great. That just gives us a view of a very quick overview of plan, do, review. It's in the instructor handbooks in one form or another on how we should plan and run a session and provide feedback to our students. Moving on from that, and if you look, and I'm using a color system here, so my brief is blue, running the sessions is red, and that feedback is green. So how do you deliver the session? Plan, do, review. Quick question to everybody. How many people use the EDIT model? And does everybody, hang on, I can't create the screen big enough. So you're gonna have to, is anybody not use the EDIT model? Or if there's anybody that doesn't know what EDIT model is, or perhaps doesn't use it often, has anybody got any comments on the EDIT model at all? Any feedback, what they think of it? Julie?
I always one for putting an or in.
No, please do.
Edix works for the explanation demo, have a go, and then it tends to, the last bit merges together. So
Yeah.
it's kind of have a go, talk them through it, let them have another go, talk through what they liked, what they didn't do, let them have another go if need be. So
Yes.
edicts can't be followed exactly, but it gives you a format in your head.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
depending on time scale, it can be time consuming. And sometimes it's better to use ideas depending on what evolution you want to take them through.
Yeah, and it depends what you're teaching, doesn't it, Gary?
Exactly, yeah.
You know, it's horses for courses. I mean, EDIT model, probably, you know, they teach people to fly using the EDIT model because that's imitate section is ideal. Has anybody else got any feedback of using the EDIT model, if it works, it doesn't work, or if they've adapted it a little bit? Deadly quiet. I love this.
Well, I agree with Julie entirely. The edict works very well up until the end point, and then we all end up adapting it. We all work with the student as to how we give that feedback, how we coach them or train them from onwards.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Great stuff.
It works really well for that instruction from the beginning, like how to tie a knot. It works very well.
Yes.
Once you then get into that more coaching, you know, they've tied the knot 20 times, but they keep on putting it slightly wrong. Well, you might kind of follow it, but you might just say, "Oh, put that round the other way," you know, by the end of the week, and that's all they need. So it's initially it's good to follow, but I find as the week progresses, you slip into more just giving them handy little pointers, which it comes back to the feedback, I guess.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I like what I'm hearing. Okay. So let me just, so this is my view of the EDIT model, of what I use. And yeah, absolutely. Like anything, you have to adapt using it in the right environment. So for me, it's to explain a bit at the very start, what you're going to do, why you're doing it, how you do it. You try and do a demo. Do you always have to do a demo? The answer to me is no, depending on the situation. If you're doing let me come back to this too. If you're doing a trainer's course, imitate. So they're looking to imitate exactly what you want them to do. Correction. So, you know, first phase of feedback, and that's why I've done it on this color format. The correction is, you know, the feedback stage, what went well, what could you do differently next time? How do you rectify it? Using open questions, let them try again. Can you always try again on that session? Have you got the time to try again on that session? You may not be able to because you're trying to fit 3 or 4 students in one session. Do you have enough time? So you may have to fit it on later on in the day and then summarize at the end of it. I do try when I've done a session every time is try and get some form of group feedback, individual feedback to each of them, but also try and get some overall feedback to the whole group. One of the key things I find is once I've explained or done a demo, is making sure the students really understand what I'm asking them to do, even if I've demoed it. They don't always understand what you want them to do. Depending at what stage of the learning environment they're at, and this is the difference between teaching and coaching, is if they really understand it. Because sometimes if they haven't got things right, they could be disheartened. They could have lost interest a little bit. They're not so motivated. There's lots going on around them, so they're looking at something else. So they've taken their eye off the ball. So it's always making sure the students really understand what they're going to do by using open questions. And then really, yeah, it comes back to the plan, do, review for me. So it just gives me, or gives you a flavour of where I'm coming from in terms of my approach to how I instruct, and what I've learned from past experience of dealing with more high-performing teams, and then how I deliver it in that approach, how to deliver the session. Now, this starts moving on between the coaching and the teaching. So for me, when I'm trying to deliver a session, it's always variety and fun in everything I try and do. I try and have a chocolate box in the cockpit. I tend to, I've been told, eat too many of those chocolates and don't share it with the students when they've done something well. Hence, I'm getting bigger and bigger. So I've been told I've got to change that, and the chocolates are hidden. But we do have a sink cupboard on board of chocolate and crisp. But it's making it fun, because I believe that if it's not fun, the students don't learn. You know, they want to have fun. Creating bite-sized chunks. So I've spoken about this earlier, about breaking it down into small teaching chunks. The biggest problem I have observing other teaching when I'm doing a school inspection, or if I've been sitting on other courses, is overfilling the cup with information. I don't know how many people have experienced that. And my biggest worry always is, once we're teaching or once we're instructing the students, if we overfill the cup, how much do they retain? Have they retained the information that actually not important whatsoever? And the key information they do need to know is overflowed and gone down the sink? Or have they retained the key information? And when do we know when to stop filling that cup? Which I think is instructing. That's one of the hardest things to know, is when we get to that right level of actually stopping. And I think for a lot of instructors, you know, Julie, we had to chat earlier, you know, we like talking, don't we, Julie?
Ian, I think you've hit the nail right on the head, because what it does is it comes back to you assessing your student in the first place as to the amount that you're going to deliver.
Absolutely, yeah. And it comes back to the plan, do, you know, it comes back to the student, what you're going to teach, how you're going to teach it, and then looking at the plan, do, review. And that's my approach of how I do it. So it's a little bit different. So I do try and break it down into create bite-sized chunks. It's difficult. It is so difficult. If you think about delivering a radar course, how do you break that down into bite-sized chunks? Yeah, Julie's laughing. How do you deliver a VHF course? Do you think all the information you've got to get across in one day of a VHF course? Huge volumes of information. What are the key things that those students need to take away from a VHF course that's really important to them? Is it remembering every single channel and what it does, or is it remembering how to do a Mayday call? Yeah, is it a Mayday call or every single channel?
Mayday call.
Yeah, absolutely. But not everybody appreciates that. You know it, but not everybody appreciates that. So let's just have a look at teaching, coaching, mentor in a very quick way at the moment. Teaching, for me, it's direct instructions that you give to your student, and it's a more formal style of teaching. It's not informal, it's more formal. So it's very directive, and you're spoon feeding the students in a teaching environment. That's in principle. The coaching is more about less formal approach. and it's asking the right questions. So again, it's asking it's asking the right open style of questions to help the individual to work through their own issues. So I think Julie, you spoke about earlier, they know how to get away from the pontoon. You want them to be safe, but it's asking them the type of questions so they learn from that environment. So you can describe to me what happened then, or share with me what happened. It's asking those open style questions for them to understand what happened in that scenario. So they're starting to self-learn effectively. Because that's what coaching really is. It's a part of a self-learning process. And then the mentor, well, it's an interesting one, this one. A mentor is more formal approach again in how you mentor somebody. So for me, where would I place somebody who I might mentor? It might be somebody who's a yachtmaster who wants to be a cruising instructor. And he may need some mentoring before he does his cruising instructor course. So again, it's direct questions I'm going to ask him, but provide information sources so he can go off to research what he needs to know. Because technically, being a YMI, he should, when it comes to his cruising instructor course, should be able to go and pick up a man overboard first time. He should be able to get onto the pontoon first time. He should be able to do a course to steer first time. We shouldn't have to teaching them. I say we shouldn't have to be teaching them. So there is those three different elements of how we do teaching, coaching, and being a mentor. And for me, in the RYA scheme at the moment, I don't think there's enough mentoring going on once people reach the YMI stage who then want to go on to be a cruising instructor or a YMI. Some schools are brilliant at it because they've seen a candidate who they think is going to be a really good instructor, and then will mentor them through the process and provide lots of opportunities for them to do so. Yes.
It would appear to me that teaching is when the client hasn't necessarily got the knowledge. So you have to put the knowledge into them. Once you've got the coaching stage, hopefully they've got the knowledge, but you have to coach them through that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to come on to that. Absolutely.
Oh, right.
That's brilliant. No, don't. Please do. It means your brain's thinking. You're thinking ahead, which is really, really good. Yeah, absolutely right. And then provide feedback. We should be using best practice. I hate using the word good, because what is good? Everybody's got their different definition of what is good is. We're using best practice and use a variety of styles and formats. So it goes back to the very first screen of I put the student first in understanding how they learn. So use a variety of styles and formats, and then minimize your debriefs to focus on the nuggets. People rarely take away more than 3 things per session. So make sure the important ones. One of the key things we had when we were coaching sailors at the race level is these youngsters, their parents are spending a fortune on these squads. And the coaches at the end felt, in order to show the parents their little Johnny was getting ready for money, well, they would spend a debrief doing an hour. Waste of time. If you go to a management conference, how long do you stay awake for when somebody's up there talking? We're going to have a coffee break in a minute. Not long. People start to switch off. You debrief 10 minutes. That's all it needs to be. Don't do it any more than that. Personally speaking, I'm coming quite authoritative here, Cross, but it's quite passionate, I find. Do you agree, Julie? Brilliant, thank you. I've been told I'm going to stop when Julie starts painting her vases today. So again, feedback, minimize it, but try and identify some things they can take away. So moving forward, just a recap on what we've just looked at so far. For me, it's about putting the student first, looking at the outcomes, having a session with a plan, do, review, using the EDIT model. And yes, you may have to adapt it to what works for you a little bit, but it's a base format you can work from that is effective and is a known way of teaching. Don't overfill the cup, because we know we want them to be successful. And if we overfill it and they take away the wrong information, then it may not work for them. So I'm going to give you all just a quick 5-minute comfort break to grab a drink or whatever. Have a look at the screen. Please don't say anything. If anybody, when we come back, can tell me what's unique about FedEx Express. I think Alex mentioned it earlier already. He didn't actually mention what's unique about it, but I think said FedEx delivery was coming to him. So people have a look at it, leave it on the screen. We'll have a quick break, and then we'll kick off. So it's 5 minutes.
So, Mr. Smithin, how are you today anyway?
All good, Gary. Thank you. In fact, I've just been to FedEx, strangely enough.
Funnily enough, I've just had an email from them saying they can't deliver my package today.
I've
Well,
checked mine, Gary. It's not yours.
Oh, that'll be it.
I think if Kev was down at Southsea today, his photo wouldn't look quite the same.
No, I don't think it would. Oh my God, that looked rather gorgeous, didn't it? I think Kev's struggling a little bit with this lockdown this time round. He sounds a little bit depressed to me. I'm trying to cheer him up with some funnies, but I don't know. We need to take him out in the water, I reckon.
Well, we can do that, or send him some sausage rolls.
Oh, the sausage rolls, or the what was the other thing you took? The little bakery bite thing, the croissants or whatever they were good, weren't they?
It's handy having that shop just before the dry stack.
Yeah, can't complain.
So we'll just wait for everybody to come back.
I'm just waiting for my coffee pot to boil, so that's nearly there. So
that's right. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Oh, on cue.
Has it been brought for you?
Anybody there who can tell me a technical issue on this Zoom?
I can try. Ask away.
Well, on the presentations you're doing are great, but if I'm not careful, I've got the pictures of all these ugly people across it, so I miss bits. And if I put the chat up, I've got no room to see anything.
So on the mug face shots that you've got, you should have 4 different, at the top left hand corner, 4 little grey sections. One should be 1 line, a square,
yeah,
2 lines, and so they dictate of how many mugs you would like to see. So if you go down, press the 1, that will take you down to 1.
Yeah, I see. Yeah,
so you can choose. At least you know who your friends are.
Yeah,
depends on which Gary he's talking about.
Well, that is true. Well, it's only you there at the moment, Gary. I'm sorry.
I tried to palm it off to Mr. Martin, wouldn't happen.
No. And then the chat one, you should, top left-hand corner, you should just be able to minimise it.
Yeah, but I can't make them small enough to have them and the presentation.
Is that because you're on an iPad?
No, I'm on a PC.
If you select view, you can do side by side with speaker.
There we are.
View. Let me have a look at.
So view on mine is in the top right hand corner, and then select side by side with speaker, and you get the full presentation without everyone's mugshots over the top.
Stand by side by side speaker. That's better.
There we are. See, every day's a school day.
It is, isn't it? But the only thing is, I've only got 1 person there now, and how do I?
Well, it should be the person who's speaking.
Gallery.
Yeah, I've only got the person who's speaking now.
That's all you need.
Side by side gallery, Bob. That one that works with a view down the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Thanks. I've learned something today already. I've learned lots today already. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, you've won the prize.
So can I just ask, as we're all on it, maybe someone can help me with the Zoom. I've got to do a presentation in a couple of weeks. I've got a computer and I've got this iPad. Yeah. How do I, it might sound an obvious question, I don't know. Do I buy another camera if I want to do a flip chart and stand up and do something?
I show what I do. Can I?
Yeah.
I use a PC or Mac.
I've got an iMac computer.
Okay.
I'm not on that. I'm on an iPad because it's just really easy.
Okay. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen. You have to apologise for my office being fairly messy. If I turn round, I've got like a if you like a bench here.
Yeah.
And I've got a camera set up here.
Okay.
So what I do is I put when I'm teaching, I've got an old iPhone with a cable that goes into my MacBook Air, so I can do all my chart work on here, so people can see it simultaneously. So if I'm teaching a course to steer, they can simultaneously see it while I'm doing it. Okay.
Okay. Well, can I? Is there a switch on it? If I put another camera on my iMac, is there on Zoom? Is there a thing to push for another camera?
Yeah, it's share screen. You have to share the screen. So the bottom and the center where you share screen, you can swap between the camera so what I use is I've got 2. When I'm teaching, I've got 2 Macs, an iPad, and a phone, and I've got them all connected, so I can swap between each one depending on what I'm showing.
Yeah.
What I'm teaching. So if you go to screen share, for example, you can then change as you'll see later, on what I'm sharing.
Oh, yeah, hang on. I've got that. Oh, only the host can share on this.
Yeah, you can change it so other people can share. But
So if I plug the other camera in and I was hosting it, if I push that button, then it can go to the other camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, got you.
Brilliant. Okay.
Alan, there's a piece of software called Ecamm that I'm using now that you can link iPads, iPhones, and do exactly that and switch seamlessly from one to the other. So have a look for Ecamm.
Ecamm, okay.
ECAMM.
Okay, and that's a piece of software.
Yeah, I mean, I can take a photograph later of my setup. I'm talking to you now via Ecamm, via Zoom.
Yeah, that's really clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be really handy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, have a look online. If you've got any snags, get in touch with us.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I think we're just waiting for Bob to come back, and then we will kick off.
I'm here.
Okay, brilliant. I think everybody's back. I'm conscious of time. So does anybody know what's unique about the FedEx logo?
Yes, the E to the X, there's an arrow.
Yeah, there is. There's an arrow just here where the cursor is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now I've shown you this. Every time you see a FedEx logo, you'll see that arrow like a sore thumb. The reason I use this, it may sound a bit daft, is that we'll learn. I've lost Julie. Is Julie on?
I'm here.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. The reason I show this is because everybody learns in a different way. We don't all learn the same way, and we see things differently. So when we are instructing, we just got to be mindful that it doesn't matter what level we're instructing at. Should it be people who want to be cruising instructors, people who want to be Yachtmaster instructors, or people just learning to drive a powerboat? Everybody learns a different way, and we all see things differently. And some people see things differently than others. Everybody can see what President Bush is, how he's teaching somebody else to read.
Oh yes.
Yeah, he's got. This is a real picture. This isn't a makeup picture. This is a real one of him having the book at a photo shoot that nobody realised that same book, but he's got it upside down.
Maybe read his fiscal policy the same way.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, just a bit of fun, but it just gives you a bit of flavour. So
I like the way that the child has got stars coming out of its ears as well.
Yes. Well, I've got, let me just go back. Hang on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and America at the top. You notice? So perfect. Anyway, so we've all been on our courses about VARC. I'm sure everybody knows about VARC. A lot of schools have moved away from using ARC as individual, the way people learn. And for me, it's a multi-model now. I think everybody learns differently. So how we teach it needs to be in that format. You know, some people learn from visual, some people learn oral, some people learn kinesthetic and read and write. I'm really badly dyslexic. I hate writing. My spelling's atrocious. Hate maths. How I navigate to places is beyond anybody's, goodness knows how. But we all learn differently, and it's understanding how we learn. And then going back to the first slide where I had the student first, that's one of the reasons why, because I want to understand those students and how they're going to learn, which is really, and I do actually ask them quite often. One of the questions I ask, I find out what they do as a job, because that gives me an idea of how they may learn. May sound a bit daft, but if I've got an accountant, he may be more reading and writing how he may learn. So everybody's slightly different. If they're a builder, they may be more kinesthetic, so more of a doer. So everybody's different. So I have a look at that. Now, in terms of what I'm going to deliver is this cool cone of learning. I don't know if anybody's seen this at all, but this is something that's really important to me when I'm instructing. And it's research that's been done, but it's after 2 weeks, we tend to remember 10% of what we've read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we say, and 90% of what we say and do. So the important bit, it's broken down between passive and active. For me, my instructing should really be active instructing, participating in a discussion, giving a talk, doing a dramatic presentation, or simulating a real experience, or doing the real thing. And if you think a lot of the things you do naturally as an instructor are those two bottom things, if you think about what you're doing most of the time. But I have seen, if you come to a safety brief, I've seen instructors do a safety brief for half an hour or an hour. And most of that is those students are hearing words and seeing. They're not actually taking part. How do people do safety briefs on their vessels with their students when they get on for the first time?
Briefly.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Who was that? Was that Gary?
No, that was Bob.
Bob. What do you mean by briefly? Can you describe a little bit more?
Well, I've always been aware that people don't listen. They switch off with the boring stuff. So if you spend
Brilliant.
10 minutes talking to someone about where a life jacket is and how to send a mayday, they'll only listen or they'll only remember where the tea bags were.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, that is absolutely spot on. Yeah, and I'm not an expert, so you're my peer group, so I'm not an expert on this at all. Has anybody else got any feedback on about when they're doing a safety brief?
Yeah, do it in very, very short bite-sized chunks. So, inside the cabin, basically fire, flood and falling off. So what you're doing is you're categorizing things, and you're making it a really good idea to keep it all safe. So they've got that meerkat sort of attention span.
Absolutely. Bite-sized chunks, what I was talking about earlier, or the golden nuggets. It's what you want. What's the key things you want them to remember from a safety brief? Fire is one of them. Has anybody else got any feedback at all?
I do the same. I keep it very brief. I've learned that over the few years I've been doing it, people want to get sailing. So it's really brief, and I get them to do the stuff. I get them to find the odd bits. My number one thing down the bottom is as you said, Gary, the flooding. But the DSC button on the radio, I make sure everyone knows where that is, how to start the engine, that kind of stuff, the gas switch. And then the other stuff, all the boring stuff, like looking for, well, it's not really boring, it's important, but looking for boxes of impellers and oil filters and things. We do as the week goes on, but it's just it's about keeping out the main bits. A life jacket, I get them maybe one of them, rip one apart. That's it. And just the basics. And then we get going and we do the other stuff in the week.
Okay, can I just go back to one point you made there, Alan, which I think is really important, is this active bit of how people learn, this Kona learning, is you said you go to get them to find where everything is.
Yeah.
They're going to remember that, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because they've done it.
Sorry to interrupt, but especially that emergency steering thing.
Yeah.
That bar, no one seems to know what it is, and they love that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Facilitation of discovery, Alan.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So for me, it's the Kona learning of how people learn and how they retain that information is really important. And this Kona learning doesn't matter if you're running a CI course or YMI course, or if you're running a comp crew course or powerboat level 2 course. It's exactly the same. It's absolutely no different whatsoever. Brilliant. Okay, so going back, so we've spoken a bit about sort of a session really and how people learn, and someone spoke about this briefly earlier, is the learning zones. And for me, there's 3 learning zones: comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone. And each of those is what we have in there. So if they're safe, they're going to be in a comfort zone, lifeless, secure, bored, comfortable. You can see it quite often on how your students are reacting with you and with fellow students. Stretch zones, full of adrenaline, willing to risk, excited, anticipating, dreaming, alive, challenge. Then the panic zone, stressed, fearful, exhausted, fed up. Who's had experience of those zones and recognizing what's going on?
For sure.
Yeah. Do you want to describe or share with us a scenario?
Shall I go?
Yeah, please, Julie.
I had a group of older gentlemen on a day skipper course quite a few years ago. One of them was an instrument checker, but he wore varifocal glasses. So he'd look out the window and then look at the instruments, and he'd have to look at the instruments for 10 or 15 seconds to get the focus right, and then look back out the window. That on its own wasn't a particular problem, but every time he looked down, he pulled down hard on the wheel with his right hand. So before we'd even got halfway down the river, we'd had 5 near collisions. So that became quite a thing. And we were coming back in at dark, in the dark, and we were going to a particularly dark bit of the Hamble River where you go from Mercury up towards Universal.
Yeah.
And he got in an absolute panic. He was on the helm with someone else navigating, and he literally walked off the helm.
Wow.
Said, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It wasn't a particular thing. He just literally, I can't do this. And he just stepped away from the helm.
It's an interesting scenario, and it's how we as instructors deal with a scenario like that. I had one where I was observing somebody doing a Latin long position. It was just outside Osborne Bay. It was at night, and it was a YMI candidate, and he had got it wrong, and I had to give him feedback, and he immediately went into the panic zone because he thought he was being criticised. And it's your approach of how you deal with a situation like that. He was stressed because of the situation. He was stressed already because of the situation, because he felt he was putting under a lot of pressure to do this. He was probably exhausted because it had been a grotty weather week. He was probably fed up because he could see that his performance perhaps wasn't where it should have been during that week. He was also probably worried and frustrated. So combination of all those things, of when you're dealing with a student and you're having to give feedback, you have to tread really carefully of how you deal with that scenario. And this is where you move from that teaching zone where you've got to coach them. You've got to put a bit of an arm around them and say, okay, look, let's show me, you know, what's your plan? Show me your plan and talk me through your plan. And it's really important of how you ask those questions, those open questions, to give them some reassurance and get them to understand the situation. And it's easy sometimes from people that we're instructing to go from the comfort zone into the panic zone in one hit. They've just gone very quickly. So it's just being aware of it. But also we can use those learning zones to stretch people, which is ultimately what we're trying to do at times. We're trying to stretch them to be better people, what they've come to join us for. I had one guy who was on comp crew course. I was on the river, we came out of River Hamble on a school boat, but the sails up, nice force 3, we're sailing along. He didn't like the boat tipping over. He was in panic mode. You know, he was with his nephew. They were on the course. He was grabbing on the side of that boat like it was the Titanic going down. He wouldn't let go. He was in a real panic mode. And it took a long while to try and get him back into a stretch zone, a comfort zone. So it's how we work with our students in those learning zones. And that for me is really important to understand, that people can flip between those zones without you even realizing it. And it's you as an instructor need to address that and how you address it. And it's not easy. Because as instructors, we don't get on with everyone. We're not going to be able to instruct everyone because of personalities. I'm sure you've experienced it sometime or another, when for whatever reason you just can't teach that person because there's just something there that doesn't quite work. The chemistry doesn't quite work.
Sorry for butting in, Ian. I've got
no, please do. Okay, take care.
Off. I'll hopefully catch up on the posted sessions from Steve, but yeah, thanks very much for that.
My pleasure. You take care, and I hope it turns out successful or well.
Yeah, as long as we get them, then yeah, can give it back to the family.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right,
take
lovely.
care.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Ta-da.
So moving on what we've looked at of how people learn and trying to pull it together before we move on to the specifics of teaching and coaching, is obviously I've spoken about this being movable, is where we see everyone. And again,
Ian, sorry, can I just, at the end of your last session before we broke, I had a question. I've been waiting to see whether you sort of came back to it. I find with the edicts that they that we use the word correction in edicts.
Yes.
I always feel that that's better worded as coaching. Am I a little bit off ball for beginners there?
No, I think that's a really good way of putting it. What I've put on there is try to put the definition of it down.
Yeah,
I think coaching is equally. The problem is, I've jumped around here. Apologies, sorry, Gary. The issue is difference between teaching and coaching and what you're doing. I think when the correction is an element of teaching again or coaching. It's a combination of both. And I'll explain why shortly. And hopefully that will make sense why I'm hesitant. And that's probably the reason why I've left it as correction. I think coaching, it's a definition of what coaching really is. And that's where the confusion sometimes arises. Because I said, when you do race, when you're at the RWA, everybody who's working with sailors on the racing division, they're all coaches. No, they're not. They're actually at times teaching, and sometimes they're coaching. It's not a one hat fits all. It is a combination. I think you're absolutely right. That correction, you use the correct style in that scenario. So sometimes it could be coaching, or sometimes it could be teaching. Depends what the issue is at the time with what they're doing. Does that make sense, Gary?
Yeah, it does. It falls in with what I think. I've always looked at that and thought correction sounds a bit draconian almost when we're teaching new instructors. When I first became a PBI, I guess I slightly misunderstood it. I learned after 2 courses for sure. So it's always intrigued me that that section of edict. So in that way.
No, I understand totally what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and yeah, to a strong element, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So just going forward, we've done these nice ice cream tubs. So for me, is a novice, we're normally teaching. Advanced beginner, we're normally teaching. Coaching, they're normally competent. Proficient, they're normally, it's coaching when they're proficient, and then when they're expert, we're normally mentoring. Okay. Now, if you ask somebody, if you asked after them, if you're a yachtmaster, one of the things you should be able, for your yachtmaster YMI, Sal, for example, you should be able to demo straight off how to do man overboard sailing. Would everybody agree? Yeah, okay. So technically you should be an expert. Okay. The real big thing at the moment is how many times have YMIs or yachtmasters turned up to do their YMI, their cruise instructors, that actually can't do a man overboard first time. And so technically they're experts. And quite often on that course, where they may sit as an expert, they drop down to be competent or proficient. So the trainer ends up coaching and not mentoring. Does that make sense to anybody? Has anybody experienced any of those scenarios where perhaps somebody's done a crew course and they should know something, and you find you're back teaching again before they move on to the next level? It could be on a powerboat course, on the drift method, for example. Oh, has anybody can share any experiences of those scenarios at all?
I quite often find with coastal skippers that they will arrive feeling that they're in the competent and actually a still advanced beginner and get that issue. Absolutely.
And you go back to teaching again, being more direct in your approach of how you teach them.
Yeah.
Before they move on again. Absolutely. That's really brilliant. Thank you, Debs. That's really helpful. I find it a lot.
Although I'm not a YMI yet, I've sat in on many courses with Julie, and one of the things that Julie and I have discussed a number of times is the number of people come on YMIs and have lied to get there. YM prep and have lied to get there. So I've obviously witnessed Julie go through the all of that, in a very fluid state. So even the theory and the practical aspect, it's a constant reassess, change style, teach, coach, back to teaching again. It's not a defined pyramid. It has to change.
And that's why I've got the arrow on the side of it with 2 arrows on it, because you're going up and down that scale, depending on what you're delivering as as a subject matter, you're going up and down that line to where they sit. Yeah, and exactly that. It doesn't matter what course you're delivering, and I've seen it on. Yeah, I've been shocked sometimes. I'm trying to be polite, Julie.
Okay.
Ian, just a similar tale, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
A sailing cruising instructor course that I was running when I was chief instructor on deck. We had a guy he wasn't even back. He was a yachtmaster. He'd spent quite a few years working away abroad, and his level had come down. So to give him a navigational session to teach, I said, well, I'll tell you what, have something in your back pocket, teach depth contouring. And when we got there to the site, I said, right, okay, we'll do the depth contouring now. Have you got everything ready? And he didn't even have a tidal curve prepared. He was, and the problem with that is he didn't realize just how short he was. It had to come out in the midweek brief of how short that he actually was. He had a lot of work to do.
Yeah. And it goes back that doesn't matter what course you're running, how you need to flip between teaching and almost mentoring. And I'm going to go down, break this teaching and coaching more in a minute and explain more why. But yeah, brilliant. Okay, so you can see, as instructors, and I come back to this word instructors, we're not really being trained in any of this, have we, in a sense? It's limited training compared to in a teaching profession. When you go to teacher training college, they teach you how to be a teacher. They don't teach you how to teach maths as such. They teach you. So my daughter's a teacher, and she said we were taught how to be a teacher. Then we do our specialist subject. As we do specialist subject, and the teaching bit or how we deliver it is added on at the end. And if you look at instructor hand, and it's not a criticism of the RYA, because I'm very fortunate. I do a lot with the RYA and do CPDs for them and what have you. But if you look at the instructor handbook, for example, the real element in there of how to teach is very small in what it compares to need to be done. How many CPDs are run to really help people be better instructors? It's all about subject matter sometimes. Yeah, thank you, Julie. It's very small. So I've got to stop because Gary, your hand went up there.
Oh, it was from a CPD point of view. It's interesting because it falls into what you're talking about here on the screen. I actually was running an advanced powerboat prep week, and my student was a powerboat instructor.
Yeah.
And I expected to have a relatively easy week, and it was the hardest 4 days instruction I think I've ever had to do.
Yeah.
Even down to the point where when we did the man overboard, he could not successfully do a man overboard procedure, to the point he didn't even do a mayday. There was nothing.
Okay.
So it was shocking. And I had to move from teaching, coaching, mentoring in a huge circle all the way through that course.
Absolutely. And you don't always recognize you're doing it. And the whole point of today is to try and recognize what it is. And my hardest weeks for teaching are Yachtmaster prep weeks.
Yep.
Because they don't have enough knowledge to actually do it or enough experience. And you actually go back to, instead of coaching, the Yachtmaster prep week technically should be a coaching week.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's not. It's a teach. Quite often you end up being a teaching week. It's quite interesting. So moving on from, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I find in the typical Yachtmaster course, the first 2 days are me assessing the client to find out what they know and what they don't know. And you can't really get onto the coaching until you found out what they know and they don't know. And they'll tell you they know everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they've definitely done all their 60-mile qualifying passages. Yeah. And that's the whole point. So if you look at my profile that I did at the very start, I put the student first. That's why I put the student first, because it gets rid of some of those issues.
Yeah.
And sometimes they recognize they're not there. I mean, I had 4 school I was working for a couple of years ago. I had 4 Yachtmaster candidates, and it was clear on the second day that none of them were actually going to get through. And it was quite a difficult conversation to have sometimes with the individuals, because they've got their expectations. You can see what the situation is, they've paid all this money. At the end of the day, they're clients to that sailing centre, that training centre, and you have to deal with discussing with them of where they are. It's a very difficult situation. So looking at all this in mind, just teaching, coaching and mentoring. So the 3 phases for me around our teaching: you ask direct questions, provides information, they seek specific answers, the students. The sessions tend to be highly structured and based on past learning. So if you think about, if they've never brought a boat in alongside, you're going to be very specific on how you teach that. But if they've done it a few times, you're going to then coach them on it. So it's more about asking open questions. It enables the coaching, enables them self-discovery because they're doing it more themselves. It's can be applied to any situation, and it dispels the false feeling and beliefs. You know, they can actually do it. And isn't it nice when you're running a comp crew course and on the middle day, you say, right, guys, you go and get the boat ready, and you know they can go and do it. So you've moved from the teaching phase almost into a mentoring phase, because you go out there and you can have a direct question with them. Say, guys, okay, how did that go? Tell me how that went. And they can give you specific answers back. So it can be quite interesting. Even the comp crew level, you can flip through these 3 phases quite easily. As where on a Yachtmaster Prep Week, you end up being in the teaching zone half the week or longer. So it's just being aware of it, really. So based upon that, as a recap, and I'm running through this because I want to get onto the important bits, is, you know, how we teach is being aware of VARC and how we use VARC. The learning cove, more active approach to learning, or how we instruct, the passive, because we know from our safety briefs what works and what doesn't work. Whoops. And our zones, our learning zones, how they can split between the 3, and the words have disappeared off one. So I apologise about that. Obviously, he was in a bit of a panic last night when I was filling that out, because obviously it didn't work. And then looking at the novice to expert, we know now that we zip up and down on all of those. So, and then we come to teaching, coaching and mentoring. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look in more detail around teaching and coaching, really, between what is the difference between teaching and coaching and how that's made up. So, we're going to first of all start off with something totally different. Technique, the physical movements that make up a maneuver. Okay, has anybody got an idea of what a technique may be classed as in when you're instructing? Could be anything at all. Could be shore-based, it could be practical, I don't mind. Has anybody got any ideas what it might be? Yeah, Julie.
First day of a motor cruiser, just working out literally how the controls work. So physically putting them into action and seeing what that action creates in the movement of the boat.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. I really like that. Yeah, so it's those bite-sized chunks of very basic stuff. Has anybody else got any about somebody from the sailing side?
Oh.
A technique would be how to perform a safe jibe by putting.
Perfect. Absolutely. Could be a tack or a jibe, something really simple. Okay. The skill element of it is when it's done under pressure. So, for example, if you're teaching somebody to come alongside, the technique could be a big wide pontoon, there's no boats around, and they can bring the boat in, and if they don't quite get it in the place they're in, you know, they're alongside, it's safe, they've done it, they understand what the technique is. The skill is when they're trying to get that boat into a gap that's slightly bigger than the boat they're in. Is that a good description, Julie? You're laughing. And that's, to me, is the difference. So what I'm going to do is give you a bit more flavour to that. I'm just going to show a couple of quick videos. So this is sailing. So sorry, guys, about the powerboating. So, and it's dinghies, but it's an RYA video on breaking down the technique into bite-sized chunks. Okay, I'll keep going back to bite-sized chunks all the time. So let me just, hopefully this will all work nicely. Hopefully you're going to see this video. I hope it works. I'm not sure if you're going to get the sound, but you should get the words at the bottom, hopefully, fingers crossed. Just trying to bear with me. Right. Oops. Right, video is not coming up. Bear with me just 2 seconds. I'm just going to stop sharing because the video I want, like everything in life, hasn't come up. So just give me 2 seconds. So I get the right one. Let's try again. Can everybody thumbs up if you can see it? Okay, so that is teaching the technique of tacking, you know. So anything, the technique of teaching is broken down into real bite-sized chunks, and that's what worked really, really well. So that's the technique. When you come to the skill is doing something when you're under pressure. So for example, where that sailor there was being taught how to tack, doing it under pressure is when she's on the start line with 30 other boats. And she's not thinking about how to tack. She's thinking about, I need to be on the start line in the right place. Does that make sense to everyone? So it's about doing something under pressure. So if we have a look at a skill, which is something totally different, bear with me just a moment, because I just need to get the right video up on this. This one is something totally different. You may have seen this because it does float around a little bit, but it is specific to what we are doing. Let me just bring it up. Get it big. There we go. Right, let me just share it. So this is a bit of fun, really. And this is, I think personally, it's just unbelievable what they do. And you'll see why. So hopefully that video just gave you a flavour of the difference between a technique and a skill. And the technique is basically the fundamental manoeuvre of what you're trying to teach. The skill comes onto it when they're doing it under pressure, and they're really, really good at it. So I'm just going to go back to my slides. So what we're going to do is I'm going to split you into 2 groups. Okay. And we're going to do 2 breakout rooms. And we're going to have a look at one group. I want you to have a look at man overboard, sail, and then the other one, man overboard, power drift. And what I'd like you to do is what do you think the techniques are, or how many techniques, or effectively, because the outcome is doing the whole thing, the man overboard, how many different techniques are there in each of the maneuvers? So if you have a look at a man overboard in the sailing one, there's more than one technique that they have got to do. You've got to teach them. So if you teach a man overboard, this is what we're going to do. How many techniques in each one? And then I'll come on to why that's important. So I'm just going to, fingers crossed, break you out into 2 rooms if it all goes well. And my screen's changed. Hang on, bear with me. I'm just going to stop sharing and put you into rooms. Okay, so when you go to rooms, I'm going to give you 10 minutes and then I'll jump in between the rooms, hopefully. What I'd like you to do is one person in each room, if you could act as the spokesperson for that room. So when we come back, you can share how many techniques and what they are. And we'll see how that discussion goes. So hopefully you'll disappear to a room, I'm hopefully. All going well. Just bear with me. Okay. There we are. You should all have been invited to rooms, so you should just accept and hopefully go to those rooms.
Three bits were the tack.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're looking for with the man overboard. So
yeah,
i.e. first bit would be stop.
So basically, we could safely say that the first technique is going to be stopping the boat.
Yeah.
Safely, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, for power, you just basically bring the throttles back to neutral. You don't really want to introduce too much astern. You're going to knock people off their feet. And for the sail side, we're talking the hove to position, get the foresail backed, and then get the helm over.
Getting everybody kind of organised.
Yeah, I was going to mention crew getting around the boat, and there's a skill in itself. If it's a rough, choppy day getting from a flybridge down, you've got to have the skill not to fall down, really. So.
There should be a plan. To me, once you slowed the boat right down, there is a
recovery. I got that a bit backside about face there.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
Guys, can I just interrupt? How you getting on?
Well,
yeah, pretty good actually. There's quite a few techniques, but what we're doing is we're actually breaking it down into techniques within techniques, if you get my meaning.
I know exactly what you mean. Isn't it? Is it scary?
Mm.
Does it make sense? When you start breaking something down like Man Overboard on what you're teaching, how many elements there are to teach in it, and how much time we have to actually get to teach it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But the other thing is, sorry, Gary, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying. I just said it's interesting. We started off with the techniques, and we're breaking them down into a sub technique, and then in that technique, there's a sub technique. And I was then thinking how much we actually give to our students in one go when we think we're giving them bite size.
Thank you. You hit the nail on the head. You've got it. Okay, I'm going to just see the other room, and then I'm going to close it all because you've achieved what I wanted you to achieve. You may not realise. I think you probably realised it as well, hopefully. Okay, right. I'm just going to, you carry on, and you'll get a notice come up about leaving the room and joining the main room. Thank you.
Is the individual clip.
Hi guys, can I just interrupt? How are you getting on?
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, we've kind of breaking it down into the format of what we would do, and now we're breaking it down into the skill sets that we'd need to do to achieve that.
Okay, it's quite a lot, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it more than you thought?
Not
Yeah,
really,
about
no.
the same.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody's different. We're finding the other group of breaking it down and breaking it down and breaking it down, having a bit of a shock.
Yeah. Well, we're doing kind of headings like radio, so that's that's how to use it. That's a Mayday call. That's all that goes with
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're more topic headings than.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. It's food for thought on what we're going on to next in terms of actually the teaching and the building blocks. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, and then the message you've used breakout screens before, Julie, I know, but a note will come up, and then we'll bring you back all together again in about a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Sorry. Did you shut the door? Oh, thank you. Bella, I told you to shut the door behind you. In your bed. Okay, welcome everyone. Well, we've got one. Hi, Debs.
Hi. All my settings have all changed.
Oh, it's a pain sometimes when that happens. I love your picture, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, I think Stephen mentioned it. It's Stephen Lees from Lymington.
Oh, brilliant. Yes. So we're just right. I think we've got everybody, pardon the pun, back on board. Okay, let's just have I just don't want to spend too long on this because I think just a couple of points from each spokesperson, from each group, whoever was assigned. I don't mind which group goes first or group one goes first. What's your feedback from doing that?
I take it away, group one. Basically, we noted it all down, and we found that there was a lot of techniques that we were doing in the main subject areas, but then there was a lot of sub techniques to that, and all of a sudden we thought to ourselves, my word, we're teaching a hell of a lot here, and it's on the proviso that we do it in automatic. We do it in automatic, and this is literally just formalizing what we're actually doing.
Yeah, but it's quite extensive of what we're actually getting the students to do when we do man overboard, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when you actually break it down and look at it more closely, definitely.
And how quickly in the course do we normally teach man overboard?
Pretty quickly.
I tend to wait for the second day.
Yeah, you can see it doing two. This is just an example. Of course, I'm not telling you what to do. It's an observation, but you can there's a lot of techniques there, and by teaching it too early, they won't be at that level.
Yeah.
Because the level. What about group two? What's the feedback from the other group?
Very similar. Breaking it down, there's lots of subcategories and subcategories of stuff that they need to know. So it's basically you must have a pre-plan of what's involved, and that needs to be briefed so that everybody on the crew then knows what's expected of them. Yeah. And that's kind of introduced through the week, right? This bit, as we do this would where it is, this is what we could use it for, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So was it interesting to do? Yeah,
definitely. One of the things I was going to sort of like come on to this at the end, but I think it's probably good to visit it now. When you're an instructor, you're pushed out the tunnel and you spend 5 years, alone until the revalidation.
Yeah.
One of the things that's always missing is the talking to other instructors, picking up their ideas and revising this stuff in order to make us better. So one of the things I was going to do is I was going to suggest to Vaughan is at the conferences, it's pretty good. I mean, the CPD at the conferences is good, but to halve it down and actually to have working groups where it's literally like this, where we're swapping ideas, we're formalizing how we're doing. It's either confirming or denying what we're doing is right, so that when we do get pushed out of the revalidation tunnel for another 5 years, we're pretty much stronger people for it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great stuff.
Agree with that.
Okay, I'm just going to share the screen back again to the slides. I'm going to carry on just looking at what we were speaking about. So moving forward, we spoke about the technique. The technique is where we're teaching. It's creating the building blocks. Okay, so quite often when we get somebody on board on a new course, and on a comp crew, and sometimes day skipper, they come on board unconsciously incompetent. They don't know they're incompetent, okay, at this stage. As we develop during the course, they suddenly realize they come consciously incompetent. And you know when that happens because the head's down, the shoulders are down. Someone mentioned about the Yachtmaster weeks, you know, the second day in, they realise they're not at the level they're supposed to be in, and they're not competent at that level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, they're incompetent, you know, and that can actually be quite dangerous when you're dealing with people who think they're actually at that level. So it's very much a teaching environment. It's very much around creating the building blocks. And that was going back to looking at the man overboard, is when you look at the man overboard, you're building it in blocks. They're bite-sized chunks on every level of what you're actually doing to build it up to a level where they can actually do it. When you maneuver to the next level up, which is coaching, it's developing the sailors or the students' own analysis of the situation. They should start to understand actually what's right, what's wrong, and then you act as a coach, almost like a facilitator, to have a discussion with them of what's happened or to the scenario. So technically, when you're doing a Yachtmaster Prep Week, that's the level you should be at with those guys. They should be able to analyze their own man overboard, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then be aware of it. So technically, they should be consciously competent. And then at the end of the day, at the top of the level, they should be unconsciously competent. So effectively, they can do the man overboard without even thinking about it. They go through the whole process and go through the whole thing. And quite often, some of the man overboards I've seen have been quite shocking because they haven't thought about the teaching blocks, and then they wonder why it doesn't work with the student, because they haven't looked at the whole process. So looking at this a little bit further between the teaching and the coaching. So the technique phase is very much about the component stage. It's where you're starting from when you're teaching them. So Julie, very early you spoke about the engine controls, you know, how the boat maneuvers. So if we're on a yacht, you know, we've got our prop walk, the shaping phase, how it's shaped. So they're slowly starting to come to terms with it. They're understanding it. So you're building these blocks. So when they get, if it's for attack, the component stage is you almost breaking the tack out, is which way the wind's blowing, the maneuver they're going to make, which way they turn the wheel, the terminology they use. So you're breaking all that out. The shaping phase, when it starts to flow a little bit. Does that make sense? When you've got that little bit of a flow. The skill phase is if you're doing attack, for example, and you've got that same student, you've taken them through the component stage, you've got the shaping stage. The diversion stage is when they're going up. So you're coming near the entrance to the River Hamble, because most of you guys are South Coast, and there's a powerboat coming towards you who clearly not quite sure what its plans are, and you get them to tack quite quickly. That's creating a diversion. So you're moving them away from the actual technique, you're getting them to do the whole maneuver by creating another situation. And in the automatic stage is when they don't even think about it. So that's the technique and the skill, the difference between the technique and skill. And the key things around that is when we come to teach it. So breaking that down a little bit more, the technique, component stages identify and develop the components and the routines that sit within it. So that's why I've got you to do man overboard, because there's so many. And then the shaping phase is round about getting the components to work together. So there's a bit of a flow, a bit of a rhythm. So tacking is a good example. Another one it could be is actually how you get them alongside on a powerboat. The key guidelines for teaching this, and this is very much teaching, is minimize the verbal instructions, because too much verbal overload is they're going to get confused listening to you and not focusing on what they're trying to do. Create exercise to almost give non-verbal feedback. Ask the sailor first before providing positive feedback. So say to them, you can say to them, asking an open question, how did that go? Describe to me how that went. And they could say, well, it went terrible. It didn't work. Or it could be, actually, that went really well. Yeah, it did go really well. So you get them to start to analyze it themselves a little bit first, but you're creating that environment. Encourage experimentation. And what I mean by that is that, if you follow the R way, there's an R way, a set way of doing things. If you remember when you start to learn to drive a car, there's a set way to learn to drive a car. And then you develop your own technique over the years. Now, some of it may not be safe, some of it may be safe. So it's being very wary of what we, as instructors, what we're delivering. It's got to be safe the whole time. So when you move into the skill phase, you're moving away from the technique, the divergent stage, and bringing other external factors in. As I said, about getting somebody to tack when there's another boat coming, or you're getting a boat coming, you're getting them to come bring a boat alongside where it's a smaller gap. And the automatic stage is when they can just do it easy. But the guidelines for coaching that is don't tweak the techniques or skills that they've developed. So if you've got somebody for Yachtmaster Week who clearly has got the skills to be a Yachtmaster, you're not there to change his technique unless it's not safe. You're there to coach him to get through the week that he can actually pass his exam at the end, and identify any areas that need looking at. Does that make some sense between the technique and the skill and what we're trying to do? So the bottom half of this is very much teaching. The top half is very much coaching. And it's this blurred line that sits there. This dotted line really is a blurred line between the two that we have to go to both sides. Doesn't matter what course we're running. As we said earlier, we're having to flip between both sides. But for me, the teaching is very much about technique. Coaching is very much about skill. And it's knowing the difference between the two and how we react with our students between those two levels.
That's really interesting, Ian. I just it's just formalized something. I had a very brief experience with where I went onto a boat for someone for the day who had another instructor, but he'd not thrown him off the boat, but he'd not got on with the instructor, and I went on just sorted to see what was going on for the school. And it was really interesting because the guy was really a lot of experience, but his techniques were a little bit, well, that's a bit shit really, but he wasn't dangerous. The other instructor had spent the entire day trying to change him and completely and utterly demoralized the boat. And it's really interesting just watching that. I can see it written down. That's it, really cool.
Yeah, it's really important. When we got racers, when we were doing Olympic Development Squad, we do not change anything they're doing, their technique. You're coaching them to win. And it's exactly the same. It's got to be safe though, hasn't it? That's one of the key things about whatever we deliver. It's got to be safe for them. Thank you for that, Gary. It's really helpful. So the development levels, starting to bring it all together now. For me, the development levels between the teaching and the coaching and the mentoring is level 1 is you get an enthusiastic beginner, high commitment, unconsciously incompetent as a rule. The teaching phase is the component stage. It's focused on the technique, identify and developing the components. When you get to 2, the disillusioned learner, low commitment, consciously incompetent. So that could be your yachtmasters that have turned up for their Yachtmaster Week, realizing on the second day or even at the end of the first day, they're out of their depth. And you're having to teach, and you go back to the shaping phase. They've got the basics, they've got the basics there because they've got to that level, but it's you end up getting the components to work together to flow to the whole technique. And it can be a real challenging week when you get that scenario. And I'm sure that's happened on cruising instructor courses, or YMI courses. Those same scenarios have happened. When you get to level 3, we're moving into this coaching phase. So we've got a capable but cautious student. They've got a high commitment because they can do it. Consciously competent, but we can start, we're not teaching them, we're moving into that coaching phase. And they're switching their attention away from the technique to external factors. Exactly what you were saying, Gary, just a minute ago, really. You're focusing them away, so you're really developing their skill. They've got the technique, you're developing their skill, whatever it may be, from blind nav to following, or if it's following contour lines, or finding their lat of long, whatever it may be. And then the fourth one for me, which is, we don't really use that much, but the self-reliant, you've got somebody come on board, they're self-reliant, they're really good, there's a really high commitment, subconsciously they're competent. It's a mentoring phase for me, it's an automatic phase. You're creating consistency of the skill under pressure. So it could be, I've known some guys who've come on to do their Yachtmaster Prep week. They don't even need the week, because they can now every single thing. It doesn't happen very often, but the boats they've been working on, the skills that they've developed, you're polishing everything. So you're mentoring them. So quite often, on the coal regs, there may be something about restricted, one of the rules, you go off and tell them where to look for it, and they come back with an explanation and describe it to you. So it's about that mentoring phase as you go forward. How does that work, of where we spend our time and our behavior and our support with the students that we've got? And this is what I was talking about at the very start. So there's our direct behavior and our supportive behavior. And there's highs and lows, like anything in life. So our directive behavior is at that level 1. There's not a lot of supportive behavior in the start of the way we teach. It's very directive. And as they get better, we can be we still need to have directive behavior needs to be high, but the supportive behavior needs to be high. So they're getting a balance of both. So we're moving away from just that direct teaching, we're moving into the teaching phase, but also starting to move towards coaching. And then as they develop a little bit further, in the more coaching phase, we can move with less directive behavior, but it's supportive behavior. So they're starting to analyze what they're doing and see the areas they know they got it wrong and they know how to fix it. Yeah, Gary. Oh, is that coffee? Yeah,
no,
please.
no, I was just motioning to a child. They could only have 2 biscuits.
Oh, right. Okay. I like 3, but never mind. I thought I was actually telling you something else then, actually. Yeah, so you're moving into that more coaching zone. And then lastly, that mentoring phase is really around about, they don't need a lot of support directive. What you're doing is that you're sending them off to get information, and they're coming back to you with the answers, and they know the answers. But as we know, while we've got this nice flow that we would really like, sadly, we have to swap around in these 4 circles continuously in what we do, depending upon what we end up instructing and what topic we're trying to do. Does that make any sense whatsoever to people?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So that really concludes where we are, except from this final couple of slides. So teaching phase is for people requiring a lot of direct technique, a lot of direct teaching to learn the technique. So it's that basic level. That technique could be doing a figure of 8. And also, Alan, if you're on your bowling, I've lost him. He might be there. But if you spoke about teaching the bowling, it's very direct how to teach that bowling to somebody, isn't it? It's very much a demo and then get them to do it. The teaching phase is for people requiring teaching to develop the technique, but there's a two-way dialogue. So they're going to come back to you, I can't get this bowling right, but you continue showing them how to do it and they do it. The coaching phase is people who develop the technique to a skill, and the mentoring is really for people who have developed the skill and can deliver this under pressure. But sadly, we have to zip up and down those four level blocks, because depending on where the level they're at in terms of what we're teaching. The students' input increases as you go from teaching to monitoring and mentoring phase. So what I mean by that is that as you go along those phases, the students are going to give you far more feedback, and you create those open questions because they're going to come back and give you feedback, not about your performance, but of what they found. They're starting to self-analyze their own performance on each of the things that you're teaching them. And then we just go back of how we deliver that feedback, really. Ask, discuss, and solve. So it's very much about asking open questions, discuss it, and then solve it. I find as you go up towards the coaching and the mentoring phase, there's less asking for me to do because there's more of a discussion which they initiate on the situation. It's ensuring as us, as instructors, we allow those opportunities for feedback to actually happen, and we don't ignore it. We just move on to the next phase. So just to conclude, the objectives of this session at the start were understand what teaching means within our learning environment, understand coaching within our learning environment, introduction to mentoring and why we should use it and when. So I hope I've given a little bit of clarity to that in the short time we've had. How do we learn and how can we put it into practice, and how we can put it all together and better understand what we deliver to our students. So that's the objectives. A little bit of a summary of bringing it all together. So I'm recommended approach our student to start with, looking at the course syllabus and how we teach it, coming up with our plan, how we deliver it and review it, how we actually deliver it. So one approach is with the EDIT model. Correction can also be coaching or teaching, Gary, as you brought up earlier, which I think is really important. Make sure we don't overfill the cup and they lose the important information they need to retain. Alan spoke earlier, you know, when we do the safety brief, you know, he points out the DSC button. How they learn, making sure we understand, and that's why you put the students first. How the areas, the active areas you want to use as an instructor in order that they're going to remember after 2 weeks the key information you told them. Comfort zones, obviously I've panicked again on that last one. Comfort zones of where you're going to take them and how far you can stretch them. The teaching, coaching and mentoring, knowing that we go up and down that triangle numerous times, probably in a day, let alone a week, on delivering a course. And then coming at the end really with the type of behavior we use if we're teaching or coaching and how we deliver that. And the outcome for today really is, for me, for you to take away a golden nugget that you can use when running a course. And there's my golden nugget, expensive golden nugget, I can assure you. So just going around the table really, it'd be really great for everyone if they could just share one thing they could perhaps take away from today that perhaps they may use when running a course they picked up from today. If you haven't got anything, I won't be upset. To you again.
Well, I mean, can I say I've just realised why I get home at the end of a day and I'm so knackered and I get my best night's sleep is because you're not just going through that process once. You're doing that 3 or 4 times because each student is an individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, so you're doing one process for one student, you're amending that process potentially for the second student. You know, you're not just going one process and do it as an automatron. You're saying to each individual, this is the approach we need to take. So
yeah,
you know, it's a lot of mental work that you're not realising you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Paul. Okay, anybody else has something golden nugget they can take away from today?
Yeah, I think it's when teaching skills, don't correct the individual tasks. They're
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
Which I think, well, I'm certainly guilty of stepping in and going, no, hang on, and identifying each individual situation to try and make them best. Actually taking a step back, as long as they got the overall picture on the skill, if they need a bit of development on the tasks or techniques, you might do it at a totally different time, maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like building a Lego house. You know, you've got to, you know, say for instance on the man overboard or the coming alongside is getting all of the building blocks first in their techniques. So it's you're not doing as much work in order, you know, everything's pre-planned. And I think the biggest one is the looking at the student before you go ahead and thinking around the student first.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Gary.
I think trying to identify which zone they're in, and especially at Yachtmaster level and when things might be going a little bit wrong, is making sure that you understand how that student may react in the panic zone when they're in the panic zone, because everybody does it different.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Anybody else got any comments?
I like the word mentoring.
Yeah. We don't do enough of it, do we?
No, it sums up kind of what happens when you get to top end, when they're getting it right.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there and you're thinking, right, I'm just going to sit here and just give a little bit of input here or there, which never sounded right saying coaching, because you're not coaching at that point.
No, you're not. No, you're not. No, it's not mentioned anywhere in the RYA teaching, anywhere mentoring.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay. Okay.
Having been one of Judy's students, actually, I'd say that whilst you hadn't heard of the word mentoring, I can identify that with the way that you taught me, trained me, instructed me.
The above.
Tortured you.
All of the above.
See, a lot of the things I've spoken about today, you're probably doing subconsciously anyway.
Yeah.
It's like what we said before. What we're doing is we're formalizing it. We're looking at the models and how that transpires into the next bit that we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's good for us just to remember these things as well, because we tend to, when we're doing this for a long time, we go a bit autopilot, and actually just to take a step back and start thinking about what we're doing again. I'd say that's been good for me today, is just remembering to just step back from it and look at what we do, because we do just slide into this is how we do it week in, week out.
Yeah. Well, it's the subconsciously competent, isn't it? Is what you do. And sometimes we don't take the opportunity to step back and review what we're actually doing because we do it differently and so forth. You know, one of the hardest things I have is when I have yachtmasters come along and doing a Yachtmaster Prep Week or Coastal, and they use different words that I use about going about putting attack in. And I have to remember to keep my mouth closed because that's not right. That's not how we teach it. No, that's fine. You know, it's a skill. They've developed the skills, what they do, but you've got to keep your mouth closed. But sometimes it's very hard.
As long as the language is consistent, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
when they jump from
As long as
one
they
to another
understand the
to
language.
another.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Anything else from anybody?
I just want to. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to.
You go, Alan.
No, just something. I think same sort of thing as Deb's. It makes me want to revisit some of my planning. You know, and I use the use the lockdown just to think a bit more about how I deliver some sessions. But one of the things you were talking about, I found quite interesting, because I've been there so many times. I'm sure other people are. Is that glorious bit where a student is just about entering the panic zone, and I think it's just made me think that's one of the most valuable places if you can manage that, because I mean, I've got it wrong a couple of times where I've had in comp crew. I love teaching comp crew, and you get people on there and they can learn so much if you just let them go into the panic zone a little teeny bit. But the timing's everything, and I've had it a couple of times where I've got it wrong. They've screamed, and I just go and apologise and say, "I'm so sorry, you know, that was my fault." But that lovely moment where, you know, people are just pushing themselves, you know, and you just have to be really on it, don't you, to make sure they don't enter the panic zone. It's just got me. I've got loads of examples where that's nearly happened, But the plus side is you see someone beaming and they learn 6 months sailing in a 5-minute experience. Do you know where I'm coming from with that? Yeah,
totally. Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. Anything else from anybody? No?
I think everybody's said it so far, but I think that the exercise with the breaking down the technique, is just formalized some things in my mind in terms of how I teach, where my natural breaks need to be in that teaching. I need to do that more. I've been working, I think a bit like Alan, I've been working on little sound bites that I do when we're down below and coaching people with nav and stuff like that. But I actually need to look at my own teaching on deck to kind of break that down and make it manageable, because otherwise you get that lamped rabbit moment where they go, what?
Yeah.
And so I think that'd be really useful for me. Thank you, Ian.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. It's 2.25 hours, so it's quite, even with a short break in there. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it just gave you a bit of food for thought, really. And I'm not here to change what you do, because we've spoken about that. It's you're skilled at what you do, but hopefully give you some food for thought and take something away, and a bit of a refresher during these darker moments at the moment. So thank you very much for putting up with me.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Just
you.
Ian, on behalf of Steve and Nikki from PMT and CMT, they couldn't be on the thing, so thank you ever so much, mate. That was a brilliant session. I think everyone's taken a lot from it. I certainly have, and I'll be very interested to watch it back, because I feel I can learn some more from that as well.
I think I will be as well.
It's really weird hearing yourself.
So thank you very much for your time.
I've got to do all over again at 2.
We'll get a good lunch.
Review before you do.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to do a plan do review. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. It was lovely seeing, for those that I haven't seen for a while, lovely to see you again. Take care. For those I've met for the first time, equally great to see you, and hopefully I'll see you at some stage.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nice
take care, everyone.
Take care. Stay safe.
Take care.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.